We've certainly seen a lot of problems with Disney Star Wars over the last decade plus, but one of the biggest, most unforgettable disasters will always be the Acolyte, led by Leslye Headland, former personal assistant to Harvey Weinstein, something that they spent nearly $250 million on. That was a complete and total failure, not just when it came to ratings, but also with the way it was received by the fandom. The writing was on the wall for this series from the very beginning, and in the aftermath of the failure, and even during the airing of this show, you could see over and over again so many people associated with the show lash out, blame the fans, call fans toxic, call fans racist, call fans bigots. But now, Leslye Headland, the creator of the show, is speaking out. And she gave a big interview to The Wrap, and this is not just about the Acolyte. She talks about all the other things she's doing, the diverse stories that she's ready to tell. But of course, a large section of this was dedicated to the Acolyte, and we couldn't help but get a good little headline from this. And of course, it's Leslye Headland calling YouTube critics fascists and racists while addressing the Acolyte cancellation. Now, I do want to be fair to Leslye Headland, so we'll read through all of these quotes. She doesn't say that every single person that criticizes her show is a fascist or a racist, but certainly when she adds those things in there at the very end about how some of her critics are like that, that's what it's based off of. You know the reason it's for that. The reason is to try to deflect a lot of the blame and try to cast a wide net across a range of fans. That's what this is. There's no doubt about it. But let's get into it. In her first major interview since The Acolyte was pulled from Disney Plus, creator Leslye Headland has reignited controversy with a series of candid remarks on the show's cancellation, culminating in her labeling a portion of longtime YouTube commentators as fascist or racist. The interview reveals a complicated relationship between the series creator and the fan community she claims she's followed for years. And she starts this by talking about it was always a risky thing. It was never going to succeed. We never really had a chance, but we were so brave and did it anyway. It was always a major risk, she said. Unlike any Disney Plus Star Wars entries, her series occupied part of the timeline with all new characters and a complete absence of familiar cinematic touchstones. She emphasized they couldn't use stormtroopers, couldn't lean on the galaxy's political conflict, and had none of the visual language Tony Gilroy brilliantly exploited in Andor. Well, the thing is, and she mentions it, you had the High Republic novels. You had the High Republic, this huge event that Lucasfilm created that was a total disaster because it's almost like no one in this company can create compelling new original characters. Strange how that works, isn't it? It's one of the few areas where she directly acknowledges the creative gamble. She even admitted that any gripes creatively with the show are completely valid, a statement that stands in stark contrast to several of her other comments later in the interview. Now, I want to get into a little bit of that because that article leaves out part of the quote, right, about people's reaction. I also think any gripes creatively with the show are completely valid, Headland remarked. That's people's reaction. Then she adds, it's usually their reaction to their own reaction. But like I said, the show is always a risk. It's the old adage of first one through the wall is the bloodiest, right? So you can see what she's trying to do. She'll be like, I can understand how people don't like it. But again, people don't like it because they're just reacting to what they expect or what their actual reactions are. Not because of what I made. But again, I accept some criticism. That's kind of how this is all being portrayed. And that's how it will be when she gets into Star Wars fans and YouTubers and stuff like that too. A fiery classification of YouTube Star Wars critics. Headland stressed she was not online during the swirls of reactions surrounding the show's release, but quickly added, she's long been part of the online Star Wars commentary world. I'm a Star Wars fan, which means I've always been, since the launch of YouTube, part of the Star Wars recap, criticism, lionization, fandom community. This familiarity, she says, goes back years. These guys I've known for years and years. I supported them on Patreon. Well, I don't know if I'm one of those people, but maybe at one point in time, Leslye Headland. It was within this context, speaking about people whose channels she'd watched and funded, that Headland launched into her now infamous breakdown of commentator categories. There are some of them I respect, and there are some of them that I think are absolute snake oil salesmen, just opportunists. Then, of course, there are the fascists and racists. So it runs a gamut. It's not just one thing or another. Well, let's also put this in perspective. So some of them you respect, right? Of all this criticism that's coming in, all the criticism for your show, some of it you respect. But what do you then put out? Snake oil salesman, opportunist, racist, fascist. It runs a gamut. It's not just one thing or the other. This isn't an effort to say that the majority, right? That's why you're saying this. Some of them I respect. At its core, you're saying that most of the criticism of my show that failed, even though it was a risk, and I acknowledge, some people might not have liked it, but that's the reaction to their reactions. You're trying to tell us that most of that, the reason this happened is because these people are opportunists. These people are just fucking snake oil salesmen. These people are fascists and racist. You can only go with this shit for so long because guess what? Almost everyone universally fucking hated this show. That's the reality. That's the truth. Almost everyone universally despised the show. And you can go and say, well, it's because we have a diverse cast. Star Wars has been diverse for a long fucking time. It's not that. That's not the problem. We've had strong female characters in Star Wars. We've had diverse characters. None of that's a problem. The problem was the way that it was written and what you tried to do to Star Wars. But it's not a surprise that this is the direction that she would go. So on one hand, the creator, who once worked as a personal assistant of Harvey Weinstein, is claiming the criticism is valid, but later in the same interview, labels some of the prominent YouTube commentary community as nothing more than snake oil salesmen and fascists and racists. And this goes along with what Leslye Headland's wife, who she put in the show, by the way, she's been on a rampage for a year now, right? We've seen this from Amanda Stenberg. We've seen this from other people associated with the show. They're blaming the failures on racism. They're blaming the failures on bigotry. Then she goes into the cancellation. One of the few moments of self-reflection came when Leslye Headland discussed the cancellation of the Acolyte itself. I was not surprised by it, she admitted, but she did express frustration with how it unfolded, describing the process as unexpectedly fast and unexpectedly visible. I think I was surprised at the swiftness of it and the publicness of it. I was surprised by how it was handled. And that is true. For most of these Star Wars things, look, we're still talking about Rian Johnson's trilogy and stuff like that. For most of these Star Wars projects, they kind of get spoken about and then they just sit there in the ether. No public comment one way or the other as if something is ever happening or not. A season 2 of this is ever happening or not. For the Acolyte, and I think it's because Disney really realized how fucking awful it was and how many people despised this that they had to come out and make a comment. They had to say, yeah, we fucked up. We're not going to do this again. At modern Disney-owned Lucasfilm, projects are canceled all the time, but typically they're canceled quietly with no formal announcement. Disney and Lucasfilm seemingly wanted to make a statement and let the entire fan base know it wasn't coming back. Headland explained that once she began receiving calls about viewership and criticism, she recognized the momentum. Okay, the writing's on the wall for sure. So in the interview, she says that she started receiving feedback and calls from Disney and Lucasfilm immediately. That's like, hey, no one's watching the show. The people who are really fucking hate it. There's a ton of fucking backlash. And that's when she says, oh, I guess the writing's on the wall. This probably isn't happening. And, she does talk, interestingly, more about Star Wars criticism. Perhaps the most quietly explosive line in the interview came when Headland mused about the future of the franchise's cultural relevance. It made me start to think, the content being made about Star Wars will ultimately be more culturally impactful than actual Star Wars. Now, these are the same people who you just called snake oil salesmen, grifters, fascists, racist, stuff like that. You're saying that those things are going to be more culturally impactful. And isn't that interesting? And quite frankly, I don't necessarily disagree. I disagree with the fascists and racists and all this bullshit she's saying to try to deflect from the genuine criticism of her dog shit. But in terms of the commentary community being more impactful and more people watching them than the actual shows themselves, that's true. It's true when it comes to Disney Star Wars, because you have killed Star Wars. Disney has killed Star Wars. Disney Lucasfilm has killed Star Wars. So you're the ones that did this. You're the ones that made the people calling out your bullshit more relevant than you. And the truth is, when she was talking earlier about, well, I've known these things. I've known these channels. Everybody at Lucasfilm knows this. There's people at Lucasfilm that hopped on campaigns to try to get people like me demonetized and kicked off YouTube. There's people at Lucasfilm that you cannot work there if you follow some of us, if you publicly follow some of us, right? That's how far it's got. These people all fucking know us, which isn't that interesting. Isn't that interesting? Maybe it has become more culturally relevant than Disney Star Wars itself. And she would go on to talk about, the plans she had for the future and for season 2 and all this stuff. Well, obviously, that's not going to happen. And maybe this sycophants who are still begging for an Acolyte season 2 and think it might actually happen, maybe you can go crawl back into the fucking hole you came from, because obviously it's not going to happen. But Leslye Headland calling out fans and trying to say, I accept some criticism, but really she's trying to deflect all of it, just like all of her co-stars have been. The show is dog shit. It was utter dog shit. It lost them a fuck ton of money. The people that did give it a chance did not like it. And you can use those words over and over again, fascist, racist, whatever, but they continue to lose more and more meaning because people know the average viewer that tuned into this hated it. And that's why it got shit canned. What do you guys think about this? Let me know in the comments section below. Smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I'll talk to you later.